Hello there, people and listeners of the Hungry Podcast. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Paul Ainsworth onto the podcast. Paul's career began working under Gary Rhodes at Rhodes in the Square before later joining Gordon Ramsay at Royal Hospital Road, and he was part of the team that went from took them from 2 stars to 3 stars. Paul is now a glittering restaurateur. I'm glad I said that right. It's always a bit of a mouthful. And he's got a whole host of delicious restaurants down in Cornwall. Number 6 in Padstow, the Mariners, Cafe Rojano, Padstow Townhouse, Cici's Cocktail Bar. I think I've got all of those. Paul is currently the judge on Next Level Chef alongside Gordon Ramsay and Nisha Arrington. Really interesting, unique cooking program. I've actually watched the first episode. I've got 2 more to catch up on. It's really, really interesting. Paul is also the host of Knives, Forks and Tunes podcast, which is a really, really good podcast. Your hour with Tom Kerridge it's very joyous, that hour. You can just put you in a good mood. So look, you're a very, very busy man, and I'm exceptionally, grateful for giving us the time today, Paul.
Thank you for having me. And listen, it's a pleasure to be here, Dan. And before we went live, I was intrigued by your story and how you've come to doing the podcast full time. So congratulations and thanks for having me.
No, not a problem. And I think for our listeners, I'll give a bit of context. So last summer, I was in a bit of a kind of a funk. And just my head was sort of a cacophony of crap, to be honest. And I needed to escape the sort of stress-soaked London and head down to Cornwall for like a big kind of Cornish cuddle, lots of soul-nourishing sea air, big kind of boundless blue skies. And I needed to sort of absorb that. Anyway, so I got down to Cornwall and I'd just seen Great British Menu, and one of Paul's chef patron was Chris was on the program, and it was making absolutely banging food. And I was like, screw it, I'm just going to go to a Michelin-star restaurant on my own. It was a bit weird, but I was like, screw it. And honestly, the food I'd seen there was just outstanding. And when I got back to London, I just quit my job and was like, let's go for this. But where they'd sat me was, I could see right into the kitchen, and there was a quote on the wall, and it straight away sparked my curiosity. And it was, make it happen together. And I'd love to know why that is on your wall, or where did that come from?
It's a great question. Make it happen came from right at the beginning of our journey. We set this restaurant up, number 6, in 2005, December the 10th. We opened our doors, that wooden creaky front door, and we went on this journey, and right back in those days when we were all we could afford to put on the menu was mackerel and calf's liver, and I love those things to bits now, and pork belly, and we had this burning ambition that every day we would come in and try to be the best we could be with what we had, the people around us, the tools around us, to nurture the team, guide the team, to make sure that we were always curious. We never stopped asking questions. We never stopped moving forward. And whilst you've got all of those kind of like objectives, those goals to go in every day, day after day, to make something a habit, and then once it becomes a habit, then that breeds consistency. And what you need to do with that is sometimes you just simply need to dig deep and make it happen. And in the early days, all the obstacles, all of the no one in the team, everything that came against us, there was always that thing of just looking at the clock and being like, right, come on, dig deep, make it happen. 17 years later, here we are now. And about 3 years ago, I added underneath make it happen together, because I've developed and changed as a person, and I've had the most amazing mentors in my life, but one particular person who just gave me this advice very, very early on when I opened my first business was that make it about the people, and if you make it about the people, then everything else will slowly but surely fall into place. Empower people, energize people, know that you aren't always, as the leader, gonna have the best decision. You might not be able to execute your idea as well as someone else can. So then what you don't have is this kind of megalomaniac environment. You have this environment of just everyone being empowered, and that's taken time. But it got to the point of like, it's no longer that sort of solo feeling of like, right, make it happen. It was like, you still need make it happen, but let's make it happen together. And more recently, something that we've really changed in the kitchens service at number 6 is that we've now, rather than a group of chefs all doing different bits of prep jobs for different dishes to then come together on it, we've actually broken down the dishes and given the dishes to a group of individuals, a section. So you are responsible for the pigeon, the turbot, and the prawn, and everything that dish, those dishes are about, you are responsible for. So as opposed to like, right, can I have something off your section because I need it to make this dish? It's been just game changing in that now the chefs have real true responsibility from start to finish, that as a team, little individual pockets of teams in the kitchen, that's their responsibility. And that's our kind of free sort of real strong mantras, if you like, that we really now like live by. And that is, we make it happen together, and we have responsibility.
It's fascinating to hear your answer on it, Paul. And so you were saying you've changed a lot. I'd love to know specifically, because I think loads of people start with a business and that you need this solo kind of, I can do whatever, I can make it happen. You need that to get that initial uplift and get it going. But I'd love to know how you've specifically changed from the day you opened those doors to, I don't know, 26th of January today. Like, how have you changed in the one or two ways?
I've understood quite quickly what it was that I wanted to do. And I'm still on that journey, but I realized that if I want to grow and I want to create success, not just for me, but for individuals, then I need to, like I've said, make sure and fully understand that like I lead this from the top, because how I am is then going to be that effect on everything that goes right the way through the business. And for me, I'm in the business of hospitality. And even now, it sometimes really blows my mind I sometimes think, like a lot of places, like, why are you in hospitality? Because this feels really abrupt. It feels quite arrogant. It can feel quite rude. And that for me is not what it's about. Restaurants, pubs, cafes, hotels, it's got to be a place of fun. It's a place to relax. It's not a place where you feel that you're in that person's, you're almost bowing down to these, godlike figures, because that's just ridiculous. So with that, you've got to make it, for me, the best way to describe it is like professional fun. There's professional, there's dedication, there's craftsmanship, but also at the same time, there's nurturing, there's guidance, there's taking away that fear factor and replacing it with, yes, you've got it wrong. Now, you're never, ever going to be in a kitchen environment where you're going to be like, right, can we just step aside and go into a quiet space and talk it through? Because you've got the pressures of the customer, the diner, the guest sat there waiting, expectations through the roof. But that doesn't mean that it needs to be this vicious, like sort of malicious malice kind of world. It can be still a place of like, real high standard, absolute excellence, because there's no longevity. There is no sustainability if you are just constantly going through team and almost like, just churning through people, and that for me is the success of the Ainsworth collection. Like, if I've got to pick one thing, why have we gone from one restaurant to now, 3 restaurants? We've got the pub, we've got the bar, we've got the Padstow Townhouse, the bedrooms. That is through people. That is through people that have believed in the vision, been nurtured, guidance, and then empowering them in every single way, financially, letting them run and have responsibility. And then with that, you know, they're like, do you know what, this is amazing, and I love what I do. And then you look round and all of a sudden you're like, blimey, crikey, I'm looking at pretty much like a whole team here, and like you've got people, right, that person's 4 years, she's 5 years, he's 12 years, you know, that person's been here since the beginning, 17 years. And that comes from, through like making sure you make what you do about the people. And that might not be, that might not work on a trading floor, a cutthroat trading floor where stockbrokers are like, but that's not the industry I'm in. I'm in hospitality. So the hospitality shouldn't just be hospitable for your guests. It should be for your team.
I think there's this some of the other guests I've been interviewing is this internal, external. And it's like when it could be like the kitchen moves into the dining room. If the kitchen's, as you said, professionally fun, I love that word. It kind of seeps into the kitchen. And, I even noticed that when I was in number 6, it wasn't stuffy is what the word I would say. It was like marble smooth, the surface. It was like really, but it was upbeat is how I would describe it. And on this people part, like we make it happen, I really want to kind of dig into this together a bit, because I've worked in teams where sometimes you can get, it's not necessarily a bad egg, but someone who just doesn't fit within the overall culture. I would probably say is the best way of put it. We don't have to go into names. Have there been any like hard decisions you've had to make in terms of keeping this together bit right?
All the time.
And how do you do that?
In the early days, that was a huge frustration, and I would take that quite personally. And the key to that is don't take it personally, and understand that like not everybody is going to fit in with what you do. Not everybody is going to want to fit in with what you do, or believe it, or it's just not for them. And you know what? That's okay, because I can only say, speaking for myself, that like I haven't always spoken like this. I haven't always had this foresight that that I have now. That's just come with age. That's just come with like just always wanting to learn, always wanting to listen. That's one of the big things I say to my team is like, I always say to them, listen to learn, not just to reply. And you see so often that people aren't really listening to what's being told to them. They're just waiting for the reply. You can see it. You can see the answer back building from their core, ready to just burst out their mouth. And if they just actually controlled that, and even if they get to the end of it and think, I'm not sure that makes sense, or I believe what you're telling me, but just listen. Don't talk too much. Listen to what's been, certainly when you're, younger and you're starting out, listen, and surround yourself with people that are better than you. And that don't look at that as like, oh, we're all the same, and you should never think people are better than you. It's not a negative, it's a positive. And what it means, people that have got more experience, people that have done it, people that have got something good to say, surround yourself with people like that. And now, and it happens all the time, if someone's like, well, do you know what, I don't believe what it is you're doing or what you're saying, no problem at all, but don't stay here. Life's too short. Go and find what makes you happy. Because if you boil everything down, it doesn't matter if it looks great on your CV. It doesn't matter if you think, yeah, well, I'll stick it out because it will look really good if I've got this restaurant on my CV. Honestly, don't do it. You will go and find somewhere that makes you happy, because if you're happy, then everything else will fall into place. If you're just going through the motions and you become bitter and you're walking around, moping or miserable, or that's not good for both sides. And the reason I can be at peace with that now is because I know that then that's not going to be the best for the whole picture, the team, the customer. The customer will suffer. And it takes a while to get there, because in kitchens we're always like, yeah, but there's a mise en place and we need to hold on to them, and we need them. We've got to hold on to them, and that. And I talk with all of my head chefs and my sous chefs, and I'm like, let me tell you this, the ship will always sail. And if you've got a good core, strong team, the core people around you, you'll always, and it goes back to make it happen. But don't have people in the team that are disruptive or don't believe in it, because what that then does, it spreads and bleeds into everything. Because so often what I found is those people who don't believe in it generally won't come up to the level that you want them to be. They'll end up dragging the team around them down to where they think it should be. And for me, I'd rather be a little bit more in the shit, a little bit more like running around, but be running around with a group of individuals that absolutely want it, rather than having a full team, but a couple of them are bad eggs.
One dodgy hire, and it's not even a dodgy hire. I think that's maybe not the right way of saying it. Just one person who's, it's not the right fit. That's all it is. But if that happens, it can be cancerous. To be honest, it just spreads through organisations, and I think really reassuring for our listeners who are building out teams is getting that people part right. Where I want to jump to now, or reverse, I should probably say, is right at the beginning of your career. So, well, specifically Royal Hospital Road, which for listeners is where Gordon Ramsay got his 3 stars. So you were working at, I think you were working at Gary Rhodes, right? And at the time he was very revered, and you're doing really, really well there. What pulled your soul to Gordon Ramsay? Because at the time he wasn't, like, he was up and coming, but he wasn't like he is now. I'd love to know what pulled you there.
Was working for Gary Rhodes, had heard about Gordon Ramsay. You're absolutely right. You had Nicola Dennis on Park Lane with 3 Michelin stars, Marco Pierre White at the Oak Room with 3 Michelin stars, and Pierre Kaufman at the Royal Hospital Road site with 3 Michelin stars. And I had lots of friends who worked for Marco, worked for Pierre Kaufman. I knew a couple of lads that worked for Nico. I was working for Gary Rhodes, which was just phenomenal. We won a Michelin star. I was there at the beginning of when that restaurant opened in Dolphin Square. And every so often I go back home to visit my family in Southampton, and I'd heard about Gordon Ramsay. And the cheapest way I could get home was a National Express coach from Victoria, and it would go down Royal Hospital Road. And I used to just love it when it would stop in traffic on Royal Hospital Road outside restaurant Gordon Ramsay. And literally Gordon had just gone there from the aubergine, and I'd just be like literally on, like, with my hands on the pane on the coach glass window, just watching. You just would see chefs opening scallops, passing sauces through muslin cloth, and I don't know what it was, I was just drawn to it. And these things, like I am a big believer in things just happen for a reason. Literally 2 weeks later, I was with my mates in a pub in Pimlico. I was still working for Gary. I was really thinking I want to make my next move. And we were in a pub in Pimlico, and one of the lads was like, because they're all chefs, no one knew. Gordon was not famous at this point. And Gordon pulled up outside a phone box, and I always remember a silver Golf GTI. And one of the mates, Arnie, was like, Gordon Ramsay's over in the phone box over there. So I was like, right, it's now or never. Went outside the phone box. He was on this call for ages. Eventually, he came out the phone box. I couldn't get my words out. I called him Mr. Ramsay, and I said, I'd love to come work for you. He wrote down the number of the kitchen, said the head chef's called Mark Askew. And if you like, the rest is history. And the transition going from Gary Rhodes, which was incredible, which felt almost like kind of like the standard, and Gary's like belief and vision, I feel, was so far ahead, like so ahead of its time. Simplicity, buying British, the way the kitchen was run, everything. I loved it there. So it was almost, if you like, if that was like the Royal Marines, like, at that kind of Michelin star level, like going to Royal Hospital Road was like, right, I want to try and get in the SBS or the SAS. And it was like a baptism of fire, and it was like nothing I've ever seen. And that's, for me, of all the amazing things, as well as how brutally hard and exhausting it was just that level of discipline, that level of precision ingredients that I'd never seen. I'd only ever seen like farmed bass. I'd never seen Orkney scallops come in like that. I'd never sort of the produce that I was seeing, lobsters, like 80-gram size raviolis. Like I know this is going to sound strange, but I think where I was like 21 years old and I'd not seen it, it felt like I was like in Jurassic Park, if that makes sense. Like, like it was just like
Yeah.
everything was like massive and surreal and like really kind of like just overwhelming of like, I couldn't believe how beautiful everything looked as well as how it tasted. And it was, yeah, it was phenomenal. And as you touched on, in the introduction, like I get asked a lot, like, okay, so, you know, I didn't know Gordon, I've not, it's not like it's not like I'm a friend of, I'm a friend of the family, I've known Gordon since I was like, 6 years old. So fast forward 23 years later, and then to sort of be kind of stood shoulder to shoulder on Next Level Chef. Can you imagine like being in a kitchen like
amazing.
that, and if someone tapped you on the shoulder and said, right, in 23 years time, this is how it's going to play out, and you'll be doing, because at this point he was a, people can say all the time, oh yeah, foul mouth, this and that. Do you know what? It was brutal, it was physical, it was phenomenally hard, but it was never, there was no bullying, there was no, everything was for to make you better, to push you, to drive you forward, to meet the expectation of the guests coming into, at that point, a 2 Michelin star restaurant. And it was phenomenal. Yeah, yes, it was hard, but it was absolutely brilliant. But yeah, did I ever think it would? I mean, at that point, it was always one foot in front of the other. There was no social media. There was no like sort of looking at what other people were doing. It was just like, right, I feel comfortable here. It's extremely hard, but like, oh my goodness, like what I'm learning, what I'm seeing, working with, Mark Sargent, Mark Askew, Marcus Waring, obviously Gordon Ramsay, Angela Hartnett, like they were in the kitchen, at that point when I did my,
That's
when I did
mental.
my,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
when I did my interview. And, it was just, Simone, the late great David Dempsey, slight digress, which, again, the 360 that is life. I won't go into sort of, David Dempsey, but he was a phenomenal human being. He was an amazing chef at Royal Hospital Road. He opened Amaryllis for Gordon in Scotland. Unfortunately, he passed away. But at that time, David was one of my, really good friends, and his son Jack was 3 years old. His son Jack is now the pastry chef here at Number 6. Yeah,
No way. I love these serendipitous like full
yeah,
circle stories. It's I love that, and I want to what you've talked about there, Paul. Is almost like this war of art. One of my favorite books is this book called The War of Art, and what I love, we'll get onto it in a sec, but it is this sort of military discipline that in the kitchen that externally creates this delicious, artful experience to the consumer. But I've listened to quite a lot of podcasts you've done, and there is this difference between, if you want to look at it through the lens of SAS, there's a difference between those who made it through the brutality and the tough times and those that didn't. What is the difference between those, the difference in the mindset between those who made it and those who didn't? Like, what was the 1%?
never give in. Simple as that. I know. People sometimes with that question might want a more beautiful answer. I am telling you now, like you can read as many Bruce Lee quotes as you want, and we are now a society that is so, and it's good. We're also full of information, and we're also, and we can't go on social media without someone putting up some kind of quote, but
Yeah.
I'm telling you now, the 1% difference is trust the process, never give in. Because what you can use all the quotes in the world you want. You can put all of the all of the kind of, Crouching Tiger, like all of that stuff, and all of those things can help. Some of them I can't stand. I'm not going. I saw someone put up something the other day. Work so hard so you don't have to introduce yourself. Like for me, I think a lot of that is, I don't like to swear a lot. I think a lot of that is absolute bullshit. The one for me, what's the 1% difference? Those that never give up, no matter how hard, how tough. And interestingly, I was traveling home from London yesterday, and I listened to the latest Jay Shetty with Lewis Hamilton and podcast, and it's the first podcast Lewis Hamilton's ever done. And love or hate Lewis Hamilton, I really like Lewis Hamilton, and it's absolutely brilliant. And it's the same thing. And and what it's really nice, you could look at this person, and he is the absolute goat, this godlike figure that's achieved so much, that's come from absolute working class go-karting to now 7-time world champion. And I've always, whenever I've been asked that question, I've always said, never give up, never give in. And he said exactly the same thing when I was listening to it yesterday. And also as well, Dan, I feel it keeps it simple. I feel that you don't bamboozle your mind with lots and lots of quotes and what you should be doing, and what, because do you know what the reality is? We all mess up, we all get it wrong, we all have really dark days, months, even years. I think back to my 30s, and a lot of my 30s, I think I found, if I had to look at it all, I found my 30s my hardest years. I really, really,
Because
because I just think that I was incredibly cruel to myself, and to the point of like hating myself, that I'm rubbish, I'm not good enough, I shouldn't be where, I'm not where I want to be, it took 7 years to get our first Michelin star, and of course we want to continue to strive and see what else we can achieve, at number 6, and as a business. And I think it's only in the last sort of few years that I feel a bit more comfortable in my own skin, and understand that, like, do you know what, Paul? Like, you're all right. You're not as bad as what you keep telling yourself you are. And that for me, because I think especially with a personality like mine, just because when people see Saturday Kitchen or Next Level Chef, or that I keep this consistency of, like, being upbeat, glass half full, optimistic, really, really sort of like, I've got this, in control of the situation. Like, yeah, because also, like, I treat the media side as a craft. Like today, coming onto your podcast, like, that I take that seriously. I make notes, I prepare, and I do the same with television. It's not about fame. It's not about, I treat television, being asked to go on Saturday Kitchen, being asked to do 7 minutes, a 7 minute slot on This Morning, and traveling all the way up from Cornwall. I'm there to do a job, and I'm there to, like, learn a new skill that is wearing an earpiece, piece to camera, like talking on the flies, like having an understanding of how a production team works, being the best I can to make the production team's job as easy as it can be, and listening to them. And I love that, because then that's a new skill that I'm trying to perfect. Not that, like, oh yeah, well, I'm a chef and people want to know this, so, and it's all a dicking around. Not at all. And for me, that's all boils down to, no matter how hard it's got. Losing my dad in 2015 was a massive, massive, massive blow for me. Huge, huge loss in my life. And it'd be quite easy to sort of just go very, yeah, insular, but no, like, it's like, no, like make him proud, never ever give in, keep going no matter how tough it gets. And I actually think that's a lot easier to process and to absorb than trying to fill your head with the millions of things that you see on Instagram and whatever social you're on, because then I just think that you start to build up this right, okay, I should be doing it like this, and oh, that person looks like they've completely got it wrapped up and sewn up, and not at all. But if you just say to yourself, no matter what, the minute you fail is when you give up. It's the same as if you're trying to eat well, and you have a bad day.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you then say, sod it, do you know what, I can't do it, then you've given up, and then you continually are going to eat, crap all the time. But if you say, right, yeah, that was a bad day yesterday. Do you know what? All I wanted to do was get home and get a takeaway and all of that. But then the next day is a new day to look in the mirror, look in and say to yourself, today's going to be a good day. And today I'm gonna eat well. I'm gonna set out all my objectives. I'm gonna try and achieve as much as I can, and yeah, love yourself a bit more. And because I certainly didn't. And I haven't got it.
It's
I have not got it completely perfect now, but I am. I do feel a bit more at peace.
I mean, it's quite, I feel like this is sort of a bit of therapy, to be honest, because I'm incredibly, incredibly harsh on myself. And I mean, to be completely honest, even now, I've done about 70 of these episodes, I still listen to them back. And I'm just like, that is shit, excuse my language. But I'm like, that is awful. Like, that's not good enough. And I'm 29, about to go into my 30s. And it's, I don't know, part of me, I don't know, just talking about this out loud, thinks that you kind of need that. You need some of that there. It's a good fuel, but it's just, I don't know how to sort of smooth it out,
And
if that
you're
makes sense.
absolutely right. It is
And
a fuel, because Emma says that to me as well, and she's like, it's you're absolutely right, Dan. That's what fuels the fire. That's what makes people who want to be successful and try and really do something with their time on this planet. You need that fuel. But also as well, I think a lot of it is the world has changed a lot as well, and it has become very online and it has become very digital. And I think that we as human beings are at the very beginning of this. And I think in 200 years' time, it will have gone full circle. And our generation, are at the very beginning of kind of trying to have to deal now with, like you say, sort of like constantly like thinking that we're not good enough, and that I suppose the one other thing as well is that like perfect is a flaw, and I haven't always thought that. I've always been like I have to get it all perfect, and actually that is just not a realistic or real way to live my life. And that is something that has really, really helped with trying to kind of balance it all, as you say, and run all of these businesses and be the best I can be to all of the people. Well, currently we have 166 people in the Ainsworth collection, and that, and be the best I can be for them and my family.
I love that. And I just think it's so much, I think you're right. I think the real pandemic is this ability to not feel enough, and it's just not, it's putrid. But I'd love to know, and there's a consistent theme with people who do really well and are super successful. There's usually some sort of, I don't know, knock in their childhood, or a kickback. Like for me, I used to be, a lot of my sort of drive comes from, I was a bit of a fat kid at school, always felt a little bit out of place. So now I was basically said, like, don't bother trying to get into a uni, is what they said to me. So I've always had this, like, prove you wrong. Where did yours come from? Where's this insatiable desire just to keep going, keep grinding, come from specifically?
Similar,
Right.
very, very similar. Being struggled with weight all my life, massive
Same here.
demon. To the point as well, it's all I remember. Coming home from school one day and asking my mum why I was a different shape to the rest of the kids in my class, and why was my skin, why did I have like loose skin? I remember saying that to my mum, and her sort of saying to me, don't be silly, everyone's different. And I was that kid that either got picked last or didn't get picked, and that humiliation of sometimes I think, is that the right way? Picking teams at school, that really is a shit thing if you're like the one that doesn't get picked or is picked last. And then, you know, like I can even remember his name, you know, like I know people, like it really is a cliche of like being told you're not good enough. But I did have that teacher. His name was Mr. Seal. He taught chemistry, and he said those words, you know, that you will amount to nothing. And then you start to, especially when you come into, you know, the world, you know, that is hospitality. It was then just this kind of real, like, lots of knockbacks, lots of times in my life of not feeling good enough, that then, yeah, this insatiable desire to kind of like prove a lot of people wrong. And at the time, it is a really, really not nice place to be, when you feel really, really like like you're not good enough. And like when you use that and you flip it and you say, okay, like I'm really, really gonna show you. And that is even now, even now, people that have like, yeah, like really let me down, like really kind of like, you know, and also as well, people that you've really like helped, and, you know, and given, you know, like so much to, and then they let you down. Or what, many years ago, that would have really upset me, like really taken it personally. Now it just kind of goes into, as you say, the fire. And it goes, because am I going to change the situation? No. Am I gonna change what's happened? Not at all. But what I can change is what I do moving forward. And my strong advice on that is, if you are in that situation, is just, you know, don't go public with it. Don't just keep it there, and, you know, and just kind of, you know, like, you know, revenge doesn't have to always be something that's like really physical and really shouted about. Just kind of put it in the fire, use it as the fuel to the fire, and keep your head down, and just keep moving forward. And that's the thing as well. Keep moving. Don't stop. Keep moving.
I think if you, as I said, it's part of the fuel that goes into the engine. I think if you get this kind of feeling of inadequacy, and that inadequacy can be flipped into tenacity. But then if you add that to your passion, whether for me it's this podcast, with you it's cooking and culinary and hospitality, and you focus, you kind of, there's no, the train's gonna move. Do you know what I mean? I think there's so much in that for our listeners. I listened to a podcast you did about, so one of my heroes is Anthony Bourdain. I'm like huge love of everything he did. And apparently he came to Royal Hospital Road. What did that, were you there when it happened? I'd love to know, what was Gordon acting like that day? What were you acting like? What did he say? I just think he's just a
It's a
hero
funny
of mine,
story.
to be
He
honest.
came in, and at this point, I have no clue who Anthony Bourdain is. I'm like 21 years old, and like I don't even know who anyone is across the pond. Like, it's just, I know like the
Right.
British, like sort of like food scene. And yeah, you've probably seen the clip. Gordon, I probably, that is up there, as there's probably two or three people that came to Royal Hospital Road in my time that, like, I just saw Gordon. Absolutely, it meant everything. It meant absolutely everything. And Anthony Bourdain was one of those people. He was everywhere, on every bit of mise en place, every section, everything. He was so, yeah, so honored to have, you know, to like have Anthony Bourdain eating at Royal Hospital Road. And yeah, as you can imagine, also as well, we didn't know who was in the dining room, like as in like the chefs. We were just kind of like heads down, getting it all ready, and then you can hear Gordon and Mark on the pass talking and stuff like that, and go, right, get this ready, get that ready. But yeah, I remember that day so clearly.
It's such a good story. And who's been the biggest,
Dan,
when you've been like,
Dan,
oh my
sorry,
God,
it's all right.
can you
Just
hear
I
me?
just need to get my battery charger for my laptop. Yeah, I'm gonna say,
Of
we
course,
can
yeah,
carry
yeah,
on.
well, yeah, yeah.
Jay, in my rucksack. Could you just bring my rucksack? It's on the island in Mahe. Sorry, Dan.
No worries. Who's been the biggest guest you've had at number 6, where you've had that sort of but like the excitement moment? You've been like, right, I need to be on this today.
Gordon coming to eat. That was huge for me, because when I left Royal Hospital Road, I didn't see Gordon for about 10 years, and you can imagine, can't you? You know, like, I've gone away, I've gone away, I've sort of set up my own thing, and for him to now be coming here, when once upon a time I was, you know, there in my skull cap, you know, like, absolutely, you know, going hell for leather, for him now to be kind of coming here was just huge, absolutely huge for me. One of my kind of like absolute heroes, you know, Sir David Jason. He came in the early days of us opening, and that was just incredible. Like, absolutely incredible for me to have Sir David Jason here at the restaurant. And yeah, we, you know, as you can imagine, we've had lots and lots of you know, sort of like celebrities and, you know, and famous people, but Gordon, not because Gordon's gone on to be, you know, one of the most famous people on the planet. Gordon, because once upon a time I was this commie chef, and now, like, oh, this is what I've done, and I think that, you know, I could just really feel like a great sense of pride from him, and that was a really special moment, you know, like, to sort of just, he came in with Tana, Megan, and Megan's boyfriend, and yeah, just to be like, you know, good evening, Gordon. And I also remember as well calling the check on in the kitchen, you know, Samash, 4 covers, guys, this is Gordon Ramsay. Do you ever think that that's going to happen when you're like 21 years old, living in a bed sit in you know, in Vauxhall? No, like, certainly I didn't.
As I say, it's so brilliant how right now on TV is Next Level Chef, where you're a judge alongside him. It's brilliant, and we'll definitely dig into more of your relationship in a sec. But one thing I've what I find so fascinating about hospitality and food is this kind of loads. It's like lots of different industries collide and coalesce into this sort of magic. So you've got obviously what we've talked about, sort of the discipline and the order of the military. You've got the kind of the creativity of a writer. You talked about craft earlier. You've got the craftsmanship of, I don't know, like a painter. Watching that service, and I've got a mate who works up in Noble Rot, actually, in London. He describes services as almost like the buzz of being at a football match. Sorry, not at a football match, as a football game. And it's like all these weird industries come together into this one thing to produce this. I believe it's magic. Sat Baines has got on his Instagram, I am an artist that uses food as a medium. I'd love to know, like, would you say food is art or is it magic?
So it's both. And it's, and I think also as well, just to be really clear, is well that it is food as well, and never to kind of get like those lines blurred, that, you know, it becomes, you know, because, you know, art is, you know, art is perceived by most people as something that is, you know, absolutely beautiful to look at and tells an amazing story of that artist. The difference with what we're doing is that we are wanting something to look appetizing and delicious, but also it's gonna take on another one of your sensories, and that is taste. And that also is, for me, that, like, where we must also remember that, like, the art that we are producing, most importantly, is got to kind of, as good as it's good that it looks as pretty as a picture, but does it absolutely blow you away with, you know, with flavour? And listen, you know, eating at restaurants, Sat Baines and Sat being a good friend, like, Sat, like, does both absolutely brilliantly and beautifully well. And yeah, then you touch on magic. Absolutely. And the magic for me in a restaurant like Number Six is just taking people away. We don't make no bones. We are anniversary, birthday, honeymoon, special occasion. But when you're here, it feels like a bit, how did they do that? You could never produce this at home, because that's what you're paying us for. That's what you're paying us for you to feel that, like, that was absolutely magical. And to me, what the magic is what I call when the stars align. And when the stars align, it's the food is mind blowing and you are absolutely loving it. The wine is fantastic. You feel great in the restaurant. You're either with your partner, you might be with your friends as a larger table. The music playing is brilliant. The clattering of plates and cutlery, stopping, putting your cutlery down, having a sip of your wine, your beer, whatever, your gin and tonic, chatting, and all of a sudden this hum, this buzz, that is where the magic is. That's the key of magic for me, in my own personal view of like restaurant alchemy, not just chef stroke like mad professor, all about him and his genius culinary skills. For me, it's absolutely everything, like all coming along, and then you walk away and go, I have just had a banging night, a banging lunch.
Yeah.
Like, oh my goodness, you it renders you a bit, oh man, and that's what we here at Number Six strive for. Is that to me is my
It's
interpretation of magic and art.
I love that. So it's almost like the actual food is the art, and everything around that is the magic. And when you get those two right, that's how you get a
Yeah.
Michelin star. There's Bourdain actually interviewed Marco Pierre White, and they're on Mark. I don't know if you've seen this episode, but they're on his farm, and Marco Pierre White said something that was really interesting. He said everyone thinks a restaurant is food in this sort of food service setting. Food service setting. It's actually setting service food in that order. And he talks about, and almost like the service and the setting of the magic and the alchemy, and then the art is in the food. It's fascinating how you've just kind of just getting your take on it's really interesting.
He's right. And if you and I believe that as well, because and everyone's going to have their own view, like Michelin themselves will, when you read the criteria for a Michelin star, 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, Michelin make it there, that make it, it's all about the food. Because I think there's also an obviousness is, if you've got, generally hand in hand, when people are creating beautiful food, they're obsessive about all of the other details, and they're obsessive about everything being so. Generally, for what I read, when I read, I like to read lots of the articles Michelin put on Twitter. It's always for them about the food. It's then up to me as the restaurateur to be then how I interpret everything else. So my interpretation is that, yeah, like absolutely about the food, but I personally want the setting to be lovely. I personally want to go into all the details, from the art that we hang on the walls, the sculptures, the colours, because then then me and Emma are working in absolute unison together, and then making everything brilliant. Service, as you say, comes next. Couldn't agree more. And this goes across all of our group to everyone. Front of house, make the food taste better. And what I mean by that is, if you have got, goes back to the stars aligning, if you've got a kitchen team absolutely gunning for it, they are producing brilliance, right? But then someone out front is either doesn't believe in it, putting it down, miserable, doesn't care. Now you've got to remember, like, it doesn't, you can't look at it from, say, like, well, it doesn't matter, it's all about the food. That's something separate for, like, when you're, like, if you're looking at accolades and stuff like that. When you're looking at it from a business perspective, from a restaurant perspective, I want the team to be exactly the same as the kitchen team. They love it through a briefing every day, lunch and dinner, a massive tasting every Saturday morning. We go right through the whole menu, all of the dishes, constantly talking about the ingredients, constantly like having, like we got next week, we've got Johnny Godden, our fish supplier, coming to talk to the team about gull netting and sustainable fishing and that, and how we catch our turbot that's on the menu. The week after, we got Philip Warren coming from Philip Warren's Butchers. Like, so that constant knowledge. And then the front of house team are really into it. Then all of a sudden, for our customers, when they've got this really happy front of house team who are absolutely loving what they're putting down in front of the guest, I am telling you now that perfectly seasoned, that beautiful dish, whatever it is that's going down, if whoever's putting it down and having that great crack with the guests, promise you it makes it taste better.
A gazillion percent. And also specifically on my experience, like I was it was this almost like pain au chocolat, I think pigeon offal pain au chocolat thing, which was banging. It blew my mind, that thing, right? And I got to the end of the meal and I was like, because it was such an electrifying meal and just experience. And I actually think being on my own was quite good because it allowed me to just really absorb everything. And I said to the guy waiting, who was serving me, I've forgotten his name, and I was like, "Look, this is a long shot, but I'd love to interview Paul." And I was like, "They'll probably say no." And he actually went and did that. And the next day, I got an email saying, "I've passed your details on to the crab communication guys." But he'd also remembered stuff I'd said about me not knowing where I wanted to walk and like safe trip back to London. I got that alongside the box with, the little coffee, the chocolates, stuffed my face with those when I got back. But like all those little things. So, and I think the little things add up to the big things. How do you obsess with that? Like, how do you think about, because you've basically thought of things that I would never have thought of as a guest. How do you kind of have that X-ray vision to see things before the customer can even feel
Brilliant
them?
question, and it answers some of the things we've spoken about. So if we focus on the email you got, you didn't get that email because you inquired about the podcast. At the end of each service, so whether it's Liam, whether it's Jade, they break away once their sections are finished, and we send whoever was looking after you, send you an email, because I wanted to get rid of the word waiter and waitress. It's horrible. It's like a horrible language for me here. It's like, no, you were looked after by Jade, you were looked after by Lauren, you were looked after by Liam. So then it spurred this idea of, well, why doesn't Jade write to the guest after and just have a couple of paragraphs of like what the guest and Jade were engaging in. And this goes to every single chef de rang, every single person that heads up their section and who looks after you. And it then became like now certainly being a chef is seen as a really, really amazing job, but also as well as chefs, it's our job to kind of, also front of house, and being front of house can take you wherever your heart desires around the world. It can lead you onto amazing things. It can be the beginnings of going on to be a COO. It can be the beginnings of going on to be a CFO, a CEO. Like, it's got so much potential, and the life skills and what it can do for you as a person is incredible. And I'm always so passionate about really, really talking about front of house. But what it does then, going back to what I told you at the beginning, it's empowering. Jade isn't a waitress. Lauren's not a waitress. Liam's not a waiter. They have a name, and that's their name. And I wanted them to be able to then just that was our little thing that was just a little bit different. That at the end, when quite often a lot of people read it when they get home at night and they're like, we've just had an email from Jade, and it's like. And and basically she'll have her notes, and it'll be like, I hope you had a wonderful time with us tonight. I know you're going back. I know you're getting back for the dog. Have a lovely weekend. And they're like, cool. she was actually listening to what we were saying. She just wasn't making polite conversation because she has to, because, you know, she's out front. And then you start to create this mentality, this mindset, and it then becomes about everybody in the team, not just managers.
Well, it is. It's magic. It's absolute magic, is what I would say it is, and it's just everything is being thought out. And to be honest, when I walked through that door, I felt bloody insecure. I was like, I'm at a Michelin restaurant on my dod, right? But straight away, it was like I'd walked in and they would. Once friends is too strong a word, but it was this feeling they weren't a waiter. They're looking after me, as you said. Is the best way to put it. I'm fascinated by creative processes. It's something I'm just fascinated with. What is your creative process for putting dishes together? Are you constantly, is your mind just constantly spinning of like, okay, this could work together? I know now Chris does lots of it and you're kind of more on the top, but what is your creative process in terms of pulling dishes together that are very authentic to you personally?
Yeah, you mentioned Chris there as well, and I let Chris. I put Chris at the forefront. Chris's name's on the menu because he's here like day in, day out. Me, as I do with me and Chris talk every single day on the phone, and we'll have minimum 45 minutes, an hour, where we're just talking about dishes, about food, about like seasons, what's coming in. But again, as well, like, yes, it's Paul Ainsworth at number 6, but there's a team that are like not behind me; they're right by my side, and it's also, it's my job to just keep providing a platform through financial investment, through making sure that they have got everything that they need, the tools they need to try and perform and be the best they can be at a really, really high level. And the creative process just then is born out of experiences of getting older and being a bit wiser and knowing that, like, actually kind of I think that could work really well with this. And also getting to a point with age knowing that actually, like, Mother Nature is the key to everything. This ingredient is in right now. It can be a set, it can be a piece of asparagus, it can be a piece of protein. It's phenomenal, right? How do we get the best out of it? Through a few, sometimes 1 or 2 techniques that just kind of make it absolutely delicious. Still leave the customer so interested and intrigued and like, how did they do that? But also knowing that like let that be the star, let it shine. That ingredient, what that dish is, let it shine. And that's taken years and years and years of kind of restraint, understanding, just constant dedication to the craft. And again, going back to that thing, trusting the process, never giving in, never giving up, and knowing that after a while certain doors just unlock themselves and you just feel like, yeah, you know what, here's our style, this is who we are, and being confident. And also understanding that taste is subjective, and quite often always listen to your guests, always listen to what, if someone doesn't like something, you kind of think, okay, right, let's question it. But quite often, if you are constantly testing, and we're always eating, and we always try as well to eat as much as we can in the restaurant, because as chefs,
Right.
sometimes we're just tasting a spoonful and we're just all stood round a bench and we're like dividing up in it. But have we ate it in its entirety in the dining room? Because I tell you what, it's completely different to just trying a spoonful or a little forkful or cutting a piece off and all sharing a bit in the kitchen. And that is when then what helps us develop. But the creativity is just something that, I've never been academic, but I've never run out of ideas. I just don't seem to run out of ideas. I just always seem to kind of feel like I'm fresh, and I've just got so much more in the tank to just keep going and going and going. And that's from the food to keeping the buildings looking in top form and ship shape and everything. It's just that constant energy, that constant drive to just like want to be the best we can be. And I never really feel like, I don't really know where to go from here. I don't know. I've run out. Like, and touch wood, it stays like that.
I love that answer. But where I want to go into, I know you said where I want to go into is this sort of reinventing yourself, but not losing your authentic edge. One of my favourite band of all time is the Beatles. I mean, everyone listening to this knows that. But what I loved about the Beatles is, and actually Bourdain as well, is their ability to reinvent themselves. So every song was slightly different. They'd grow their barnet, whatever. But they still had that. You knew it was them. You knew it was John Lennon's voice. And I think I listened to a podcast where I think it was when you'd left Royal Hospital Road and had gone to Chislehurst. And I think you specifically said... Sorry, mate. You said, it just wasn't me, is what you said. And you just said you felt a bit lost. And I think you've got to feel lost to feel found, ultimately. It wasn't a bad thing. But I'd love to know, kind of in that period where you were lost, how did you go and find who Paul Ainsworth is once he's been let off the shackles of Royal Hospital Road?
I think the best answer for that is, if certainly for me, it didn't feel like it at the time, but it was time. It was time to just kind of breathe. Like, I've just been in this like world for nearly 10 years of like Gary Rhodes, Gordon Ramsay, Marcus Waring, and like, right, okay, well, what's my personality? And Chislehurst was a real like little stopgap. But what Chislehurst was pivotal because it was where I met who today is one of the biggest influences in my life. It's where I met a man called Derek Mapp, and Derek. I met Derek through his son Chris, who was one of the chefs I took with me to Chislehurst, and that for me is where my life did change massively, and I started to understand who I was, because this time I had a different mentor. I didn't have a mentor that was a chef. I had a mentor that understood and taught me. So he's the guy that taught me about people. He's the guy that taught me how to run a business properly. And when sometimes people hear that, what they automatically jump to is, how to be profitable. Yeah, he did teach me how to be profitable, and made me really understand that profit, is not a dirty word, because what profit means is investment, reinvestment, keeping, and most importantly, paying your team properly, paying your team their worth, paying your suppliers on time, making sure that you reinvest in your building every year. And by that, doesn't mean knocking walls down, just means keeping the place painted, keeping the place up together. So actually people come and go, "Oh, you're painting again? It doesn't need it." Well, it doesn't need it because we're doing it every single January. And that's what keeps everything neat. Now, I didn't know those things. All of those things were instilled into me by Derek. And he was a huge, huge part of my development and me really finding myself, because I knew that I could cook really well, and I knew that I had this amazing set of skills and this unbelievable repertoire, because as chefs we need a repertoire, we need a base that that base can then form our own style, and that comes with time. Don't rush that. If you're self-taught, or if you've worked for great chefs, eventually, by never giving in and keeping and sticking at it, you will form your own way. You'll find what works for you. The other bit, in order to create a successful company and nurture people and guide people and pay people properly and pay suppliers properly, that came from that chance meeting with Derek, who just taught me so many things that were almost indirect to hospitality. And that's one thing I always say to young people, like there's sometimes this myth out there, and there are a lot of people that do get shafted by businessmen that they might meet and people they might meet like that. And go with your gut, trust your instincts, and if you can find someone that you can just listen to and bounce off and have a mentor, And it's great to have a mentor in your life. You know, my dad was that to me. You know, my dad was the original. You know, he was the original in my life, and he set the benchmark. He gave me that drive, that determination, that work ethic. And then if you can keep on meeting like mentors and sort of listening to people and knowing that, you know, I go back to that Lewis Hamilton, podcast I listened to, but he said, you know, he met Nelson Mandela on his 90th birthday, and he said, like, I just want to ask one question, you know, like, what would you say to someone like me? And he was like, Lewis, I'm 90 years old, never stop learning. And like, he's 90. And that to me is like, don't put a ceiling on anything. Like, don't be and be humble. It's okay to be told. It's okay to be, no matter what age you are, to listen to other people and gain knowledge. And that for me is, I think, where I truly started to find myself. Because when I left. When I left the kind of Gordon Ramsay group, I was very lost for quite a while.
And just for context, so Derek, what did Derek do?
Introduced me to Cornwall.
Sorry, what did Derek do?
So I was at Chislehurst, and
Right.
and the chef that I wanted, the pastry chef, turned out to be his son. And his son said, look, before we all part, because I said, look, Chislehurst's not working. We've been there 3 months. It just wasn't for me. And he was like, look, before we part ways, I'd love you to meet my dad. And he introduced me to Cornwall, and he was always buying number 6 for his son anyway. And then I started here as head chef. I came down to Padstow. I was like, right, yeah, I trusted him. I had a good chat with my mum and dad. My mum and dad said, I really, because I was a bit, again, I was just really lost. I didn't know who to trust. I felt like, what do I do now? I'd been in this amazing restaurant group for so long, and I was like, what do I do now? And I thought Chislehurst was the answer, opening this restaurant for this family, and it wasn't. And I really was at a crossroads. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And before we parted ways, Chris, the pastry chef, said, look, I'd just like you to meet my dad. And we met his dad. And he was like, look, I'm planning on buying a restaurant in Padstow for my son Chris to eventually, you know, open up and run. Chris has really enjoyed working with you, Paul. And there was 2 more of us. And he said, like, why don't we all do it together? He said, you know, I'll buy it, I'll set it up, I'll furnish it. Paul, you be the head chef. You continue to teach my son to cook, and if we make any money, we'll split it 5 ways. We lost money, as you can imagine, each year. And then, as these things do, all the others left, including Derek's son, and then it was just literally myself and Derek, and I was at a point of like, right, well, what do I do now? And he was like, look, if you want to do this and make it your own, I'll sell you the lease, and I'll continue to guide you and nurture you, because at this point I didn't really have any business lessons. And he just is still to this day, is someone I speak to pretty much most days on the phone, and is now the chairman, can you believe, of the Ainsworth collection. So it's a phenomenal story, and why I say there are a lot of people out there who will shaft chefs who have got the talent to cook and will take advantage of them. But also there are a lot of good people out there, good men and women out there like Derek, and amazing mentors that are there to actually teach. Chefs don't always make good business people, because they're so absorbed in the art and the craft of everything that they sort of don't actually, unless they've got huge backers and investors. But if they've got to do everything, they can come unstuck by not knowing how to like run the restaurant financially well. And if you don't get that right, then the art, as we spoke about earlier, and the magic and the cooking and all of this is great, then it won't work. And that's why you see a lot of restaurants simply just go bust, because they haven't got the financial management side of things right. And that for me was a huge learning curve. And the best way I can describe that to you in a nutshell is I wrote my first menu when I started open number 6. I showed it to Derek and said, right, this is my first menu. He said, okay, right, brilliant. And he sat me down and he showed me how to put it all into a spreadsheet that he'd built. And it came out at the end of it and it calculated the VAT. It calculated a 5% of wastage. So, the trimmings of the ends of the leek that, might not go anywhere or might not have a use on that dish. And it was a sea bass dish. And it was sea bass that I was using or had learned at Royal Hospital Road, where people are paying £120 for dinner. And I'm going with an a la carte menu, individually priced. So I got it, and it come out at the end. To make a 70% GP, I would need to sell that dish at £55 for a main course in 2005. Nobody knows who the fuck I am, right? I've got no reputation, no name. This town is all about Rick Stein, and I'm going to open up with a £55 main course on the menu. But I was so absorbed in the craft. So I said, oh, well, but I want to do this dish. He went, well, okay, well, okay, fine. But it's going to need to be £55 for you to make profit, because then that profit is going to be what makes you survive, and also be able to pay your team well and pay your suppliers on time and make sure that you have longevity. Yeah, but I can't charge £55 for it. That's way too expensive. So there was he just looked at me and I went, I can't put wild 4 kilo sea bass on the menu, can I? And he was like, well, not if you're uncomfortable charging £55 for it. So that dish went to mackerel. And that was how I learned. And then as time's gone on and we've built the reputation and people trust us, that's then allowed me to now be in a position where I can buy these beautiful ingredients and people trust me and the team and what the Ainsworth brand stands for to say, yeah, I'm going to give you £145 for the menu because I trust that you're going to deliver me the most incredible experience. And in a way, Dan, I'm glad it happened like that. I'm glad I've gone on that journey and it started off like that and we've had to work hard at it to get to this point.
I love it. It's such a delicious story of just, as you so rightly said, is this never giving in one foot in front of the other. I want to talk about, I always challenge myself to ask hard questions. So like, if you don't want to go there, you can tell me to bugger off and we'll edit it out. But, you talked about losing your old man in 2015. And I've heard on some podcasts that you really struggled to kind of grieve with that process. And I'd love to know, like, if you were to go for a pint with your old man, say this evening, like, what would you say to him and why?
I'd say, what do you think? I think one thing that we've done that I just wish he would have seen, because I know it's the one he would have loved the most, and that's the Mariners. I just know that
right.
Of all the things I've done, I know that that's the business he'd love the most. And I just love that opportunity to ask him what he thinks of everything right now. Because from 2015 to where we are now, 2023, a lot has changed, and he was always that person that I'd I'm not particularly a political person, but he always had the answer. He always knew what was going on in the world. He was always very up to date with news. He wasn't particularly someone that read a lot, but he just always seemed to know exactly what was going on. And I just would always be there to ask, he was just always there to say, so what's going on? Because quite often as well, where I'm in a kitchen environment, especially when I was working for Gordon, you kind of don't really know what's going on in the world. And yeah, I'd just love to kind of actually not bombard him with questions, actually just simply say Dad's well, what do you think? What am I getting it right? Because very seldom would he ever really, praise came once in a blue moon. But I know that was on purpose. And it was always to keep me grounded, to keep me humble, to make sure that I don't run away with myself. And, and he got to see some really exciting things, something that always sticks out in my mind, one of the greatest things for me, being asked to do Great British Menu. And this show I'd watched for years, and now all of a sudden I've been asked to do it, and I'm going to go on it, and it's on BBC Two, and it's in the kind of sort of, like back then it was on it like I think 7:00 in the evening. And I always remember like it was on, and I was here obviously in Cornwall, and I rang him up, and I was like, Dad, it starts at 7:00. And he's like, yeah, he said, tell you what, he said, me and your mum are going round Ann and Jerry's. He said, but we've taped it. And I'm like, but Dad, it's the first episode, mate. Yeah, he said, it's all right. He said, we'll watch it when we get back from Ann and Jerry's. And I'm like, and at the time I put the phone down, and I was so deflated and so disheartened, but he knew what he was doing. He knew that, like, and he always said to me, Paul, just, don't get carried away. Television can be a plastic world full of plastic people, and don't get lost in that, and stay true to yourself. And it's all of those things that, like, I miss, the kind of like, he, in some ways quite quiet and that, but when he said, do you know what, proud of you, mate, which I know which came obviously when we opened number 6 and that, and Cafe Rojano and stuff, but the Mariners was just him, like that would be his place. Fish and chips, a pint, overlooking and the crazy thing is, him and my father-in-law went to the Mariners for a pint on the night before I got married, but obviously I didn't have the Mariners then. Yeah, they went across the rock and had a pint in the Mariners, and and it was just mad. And all those years later, we took the Mariners. So yeah, he's that would be. I just like to almost not talk and just listen to him.
No, it's such a beautiful story you've just said there, and I think it kind of goes back to this thing of he was definitely keeping you grounded, but also it's fueling that fire, and look how that's manifested now with the whole Ainsworth collection.
Yeah, and it was my mum as well. I don't ever want. I always talk about my dad a lot, and I have my dad on this massive pedestal, but my mum was absolutely instrumental in it all as well. But I was raised in that, and I really related to it as well. And I keep talking about when I was listening to like how Lewis Hamilton spoke about his dad as well. Praise was few and far between, don't cry, be tough, all of that. And I really related to that. And also as well, just that want to please. Me and my sister talk about that a lot. I don't know, but in a good way, not in a negative way. I'm not going to sit here one minute and say, oh yeah, it was a bit traumatic. It was in a good way. Just that, I don't know. That fuel, that fire and it all started with him to please him. And then there's been other people like that. Gordon has that effect, like on me of like, like wanting to kind of like really show him, and, I started like this with you, but look what I've gone on to do. And, and Derek as well. And there's other people in my life, that are great sort of mentors. But, he was the original, and, great man, great man.
And it's a bit what we were saying at the beginning about all these things you have on social media, and I think there's this rhetoric on social media of like, don't be a people pleaser, or that's really if you're a bad people pleaser, that's really bad, and or if you're trying to prove someone wrong, that's bad. Or well, actually, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think like how can it be a bad thing with everything you've created and all the like magic you're creating for every single customer that comes to the door? When was the last time you cried? And
good question. Good question. At my daughter's nativity play, she played this Christmas just gone. She played Mrs. Claus, and to be honest, it's because she's at the age now. She's not a toddler; she's 6. And she has all of these emotions, and you can see she's forming into like she's forming into like a young lady, like a young woman, a girl, and like just to see her, like, and she had quite a few bits to say. And I would have been proud with her if she'd have been asked to be the flower or whatever. But the fact that she was Mrs. Claus and she had quite a few lines to say in there, and just standing there and watching her do that was, for me, like anything like that with Cici was just like, she's my absolute everything. She is the only thing in my life that, like, where, like, it for me, where that to me in my, that is perfection. That is right. If we're going to talk about perfect, that right there, my little girl, to me, that's perfection. That's, and to see her doing that, that's yeah, that was the last time I cried.
I love that, and it's yeah, it kind of. I know we've talked a lot about your dad grounding you, but also it's kind of. I know you were trying to prove to your old man, not prove to your old man, but just like, as you said, I was like, what do you think of this? It's almost like Cici grounds you now in the today with everything that's going on with Next Level Chef. It's just a lot of this conversation. There's a lot of things going full
There
circle.
is so much of
it.
him in her. It's mad, Dan. It's
Really?
absolutely mad. I just see it. There's so much of him in her. Sorry, two seconds. Mark, you just, Carol, no, just in the office, please. Yeah, thank. And just, if we could just shut that door. Thank you. Yeah, there's so much of him in her. It's crazy.
And I want to talk about, was it the 20th? I might have got the dates wrong here, mate. Sorry, the 27th of September was when you got the Michelin star.
Well, good.
Okay,
Good
right.
info. Yeah, you're
Sorry,
absolutely
mate.
right.
Yeah, no. But look, we talked about some of the dark days, and I think the journey in everything, because you trust the process, you never get in. But there is some days of ecstasy and jubilation. Talk us through that day, and how did you celebrate winning the Michelin star at number 6?
So September the 27th, the guide had been accidentally leaked online. I think for only a few minutes.
What is this? 2000? What year was this? Sorry, sorry.
So are we talking about the Michelin star? Yeah. So what did I say?
So we said the 27th of September, but was it 2000? What was the date? Sorry, the year.
I'll start again. Your clean beat. Yeah. So the Michelin star came on, as you say, great research, September the 27th, 2012, and it was the year that the guide had been accidentally leaked online. I think it was only for a few minutes, but in that time, people had noticed like restaurants with stars, because I think the guide was going to be, the official release was meant to be about 2 weeks later, October the 9th or 10th. So I got a phone call at 7 o'clock in the morning from a guy called Simon Holston, who's a fantastic chef in Torquay with a Michelin star. And he was like, mate, have you seen Twitter? So I was like, no. So I went on Twitter, and it had all come down, but there was people saying that they'd like screenshotting, and they were writing restaurants that they had seen that had got a star next to them. And he said, and your restaurant is one of the names that had a star next to it. So at this point, me and Emma, we're both together at home, and I'm like, my apps, like, I felt sick. I just felt absolutely sick to my stomach. So, one of my best friends, Tom Kerridge, I rang him up, and I was like, told him what I just told you. And he was like, look, I'm going to text you the number for HQ, and call them at 9 o'clock. So 9 o'clock just seemed to never come, as you can imagine, right? Just gone 7 in the morning. And what happened next was almost like, I don't know, it was like something from a movie. It was like this, you could not have picked the more perfect person to speak to on the phone. So I rang the number. Me and Emma are right. We're literally literally Emma's like got my hand gripped. I'm on the phone, and I said, "Oh, good morning," stuttering, like couldn't get my words out. I'm on phoning Michelin HQ. He was like, good morning, and I was like, hello, my name's Paul Ainsworth. I've got a restaurant in Padstow called Number 6, and I've just had a phone call this morning, and it says online that Number 6 has a Michelin star. And the next bit goes like this. Does it, young man? So I was like, yeah. He went, okay, that's interesting. He said, well, if it says it in black and white and it says it, you've got a Michelin star, I take that as good as you've got a Michelin star, Paul. And Emma just burst into tears. I mean, telling you now, my hairs are standing up on my arm.
I've got, mine are going up as well, mate.
Tears. I just was like, and he went, so how does that sound? And I was like, thank you so much, like that. And then put the phone down, and Emma's crying her eyes out. I just stood there in, because I'll be like, I wanted that. The moment I opened these doors, that was an ambition. And those doors opened in 2005. Yes, it became Paul Ainsworth at number 6 and my own in 2009. But I still looked at, even in 2005, that was something that I wanted to win, wanted to get for number 6 for me, for the team. And I just never forget, Dan, eventually I managed to kind of walk. I used to live in Padstow, not far from the restaurant. I used to walk to work every day, and I was just walking down the hill, and there wasn't a soul on the street, just me and Emma. And walking to number 6 that day was just a completely different walk than it's ever been. Came in, all the team were cheering, they're all waiting, we all cuddled and everything. And then the phone was going crazy. I've never met Rene Redzepi in my life. Messaged me on Twitter, congratulations, Paul. David Everett Mateus rang up and, was like, congratulations from absolute superstar chefs all over that I'd never even met, kind of ringing, sending messages. And I just didn't get the opportunity at lunch to even get anywhere near the pass or the kitchen because of everything that was going on. There was just loads of media stuff, press, everything. Finally, that evening, I'm like, right, it's all calmed a bit. And all I wanted to do was just get on that pass and dress and send and run service. But know now that food I was pushing across that pass to be taken into the dining room was Michelin star worthy. And we're just all getting set up. All checks have been done. Everything's been tasted. And I remember walking out the back to the pastry, and I'm about to have a chat with a pastry chef, and I just felt this big hand on my shoulder, and I looked round, and it was Tom and Beth Kerridge, and he was like, "All right, mate." And I literally had welled up, and he gave me Tom and Beth gave me the biggest hug in the world. Emma, they'd already gone and got Emma, collected Emma from our house, and they were like, "You're not doing service tonight. We're taking you to Rick Stein Seafood for dinner. Congratulations, mate." And hence why they're, our closest friends. And it's just I'll never ever tire of telling that story. It's just to me one of the most, getting married, having Cici, winning a Michelin star, creating the Ainsworth collection, buying your first house. It's there. It's with that.
I love that, and I think for our listeners, your podcast, I think Knives, Forks, and Tunes with Tom is a really good episode. You feel like, I don't know, I was listening to it over Christmas, and you feel like you're just hanging out, having a good laugh. So if people want a feel good fact, to listen to that. How long have you got, mate? So I've just got a couple more things I'd love to ask you.
Good,
is that okay? Thank you. I really appreciate this. So you talked about Rick Stein, and they've called it, Padstein in the past. And he's obviously got, I think, bucket loads of restaurants down there. What did it feel like entering? Maybe I'm being presumptive saying it's Dragon's Den, not Dragon's Den, like the Lion's Den. But Stein had such not monopoly, but yeah, they called it Padstein for a reason, right? What did that feel like? And yeah, what did it feel like?
I got that boils down to Derek. Derek had been holidaying and had a few businesses here over the years. I think in the 90s, so he knew Padstow really, really well. And he was one of those. He was a Rick Stein patron. He enjoyed coming down to Cornwall, staying in his holiday home, and enjoying going to the Rick Stein restaurants. And he he just saw that opportunity that whilst Rick was and still is doing like, you know, an amazing job with everything he did, people want choice and people won't want to eat at a, like Rick Stein restaurant, you know, every night lunch of their holiday. And he just said something to me and to his son Chris and Dave and the team that like that when we opened up was just like, look, don't come down here. You know, if you come down from London to Padstow with we're from London, it's not going to work. But if you come down here with we're going to complement Rick Stein, not compete with Rick Stein, and be the second night, third night restaurant and be absolutely comfortable with that, will succeed. And we came down here and straight away embraced everybody, you know, like got to know Rick, got to know his ex-wife Jill, got to know Stefan, who was phenomenal. Stefan Delorme, his head chef at the Seafood, who gave me the list of every single supplier, where they buy dairy, where they buy, you know, their vegetables, because I've come from London. I don't know any suppliers down here. And it was a two-way thing as well. And then as we grew, then sometimes we'd have team that would go and apply for a job with them, and they'd have team that would come and apply for a job with us. And they'd obviously, a lot of them would do it on the quiet, but we always had an open relationship where we'd ring up and say, just so you know, we've had someone from the Seafood come over, and, you know, and likewise with them. And, you know, yeah, of course, of course we're competitive. Of course I want to be, you know, known as like the place, you know, I'm not going to make any bones about that, because that's the fuel, that's the drive, you know, I'm not going to be all like, but you can still be competitive and good to one another, and not be, and not have this confrontational, you know, thing. And to be honest, I actually don't know Rick that well. Me and Rick, I actually know his ex-wife Jill more. You know, Jill's always been really, really welcoming to me and Emma, and always kind of been really good. And when we won the Michelin star, you know, there was a bottle of champagne at the table. You know, this is from Jill. Congratulations! It's so amazing to bring, for Padstow to now have its first ever Michelin star restaurant, and you know, that for me has always been a great way of working, and sort of knowing that, why did we choose to do this? Because Rick and Jill and the family have really put Padstow on the map, and it was an opportunity for us to kind of contribute and complement that. But I'm not gonna make any bones about it now that we too are bringing people and driving people now to Padstow who are coming to have an experience with us in the Ainsworth collection and eat at a Rick Stein or stay at a Rick Stein place while they're here. So now for me, it's not so one way. It's a two-way thing.
It's almost so, like, you know how Manchester's kind of where every great band, you know, Oasis, the Smiths, Joy Division, across you've got the Beatles. Like, up north, the music is just banging, isn't it? Like, the music is just so good. And it's almost what I would say with Cornwall is it's now, because obviously it's you and Rick, I would say, who are pushing each other, but you've also got all these new chefs who are coming in. Why do you think Cornwall's become this, almost like the Manchester of music for food? It's everyone's pushing each other. Like, why?
I think it starts with anything. A lot of the time, I think of course you can open a restaurant pretty much anywhere, but when you can open a restaurant in a place where the raw materials are, you know, really, really good, and then you can open a restaurant where, when they're not eating in your restaurant, they can have an amazing holiday. They can go and see some of the most breathtaking scenery in the world, not just in the UK, in the world. So, I mean, I haven't even scratched the surface, but certainly in the last couple of years, some of the places I've been to in Cornwall that I'm like, how am I only now just going to this? Most recently, I went all through the Rumps and Lundy Bay and all along the headland and stuff like that. So when you then have this kind of area where you can have brilliant restaurants, like a beautiful scenery, beaches, lots of stuff to do, it then becomes very attractive. So it's almost like everything's working in unison. And then all of a sudden, for someone that's wanting to open a pub, a cafe, a restaurant, a hotel, whatever it is they want to do, there's a lot of things that then make it attractive. And that for me is why I think Cornwall is now just such a brilliant place with such a brilliant culture and awesome things happening through great people doing great things, because there is so much that makes it great. And I think if you actually break it all down, it all does come from the land and the sea.
Yeah, so I've just got loads of my curiosities going off like fireworks. But so what is your favourite place in Cornwall? Because I'll probably go back down there in the summer or June, so I'd love to go personally.
I'd say a little. You can get there by you can go out there on one of the rib trips. You can get there by boat, so you can go from Padstow or Rock. And one of the places I either love walking along the headland, or if you go in there on like a rib or something like that. It's called Port Quinn, and it's just this unbelievable cove with literally turquoise water, and everyone in there's like swimming and paddle boarding, and it's just like there is nothing. You can't see anything other than just, like I say, almost like I find myself just staring and getting lost in like into the rocks, and just because it's so, the definition of it all and how big it is and how small it makes you feel as a human being. But then thinking like, I then start to go like, like I wonder what dinosaurs might have been there, and I wonder like how old that is and what that's seen, and like how many ships have hit it and crashed on it, and like like pirates or the spice trade, or like, and I just go on a whole kind of like, there's probably nothing happened there, but like I in my mind make it go off in a whole I start to go off on a whole tangent, and Port Quinn is just my new favourite place.
I was doing a run up the sort of where we in. I was doing a run along the headlands, and generally it was like so magnetic. Not the headlands, but it was where we were staying. And I generally felt like something out of bloody Braveheart. I was doing what you were doing. Like I was going into this full blown like, this is banging. Like, and then my brother was like, "Mate, what are you doing?" And I was just like, "Oh, yeah, I've just got really fucking carried away there." Look, I want to end on a couple of things. So, what I love, and you said this right at the beginning, and one of the reasons I do this podcast is just to get to the principal knowledge, as in like all this kind of superfluous tripe you see on Instagram and what we were talking about. And you said, never give up, trust the process. It's just so powerful that. I'd love to go and almost end on like a meal of mentors, if you want to call it this. And, you've worked with Gordon, you've worked with Gary, you've worked with Marcus Waring. If we could go through each, and if you could say, what is their version of never give up and trust the process? So maybe we could, I don't know, start with Gary.
What I took from Gary was he was the person that really first taught me about like, let the ingredients speak, not too many things, a few things done beautifully well. The attention to detail that went on behind it, but actually on the plate looked really, really simple. And what I loved about Gary was you wouldn't see him for months, because he was when I came in, he was the television chef. But then when he wasn't filming and he would come and work with us, first one in, last one out. I would be walking no matter what time. You get there at like 6:30 in the morning, and Gary, and I'm talking as well, not just there looking gleam, a very immaculate man as well, not just there like a sack of potatoes, peeling the potatoes for the veg section, getting right amongst it. Gordon, I would say, along with along with my dad, Derek, like one of the most unique, unbelievable human beings I've ever met. And I, not making that sound like like a sort of like a worship sense, but I just think some people just are like unbelievable, and it just blows my mind how they, and it goes back, like I said to you, my dad wasn't a big reader. He wasn't, but he just seemed to always like he just, it was like he'd been here before. When you hear that, it's like he'd been here before and seen this before. It was like it wasn't a dress rehearsal. It was just like he'd seen it before. And when I sort of just, when you sort of look and you kind of know Gordon like how I know Gordon, and you look at like not just the achievements, but just kind of like how he goes about what he does. And and I'm not, forget the, like what the television version you see of Gordon, when you sort of see everything behind it, and also the, when we'll talk in the hard times he's had and the life lessons he's learned, and just that bounce back that he has, just that absolute resilience that he has is phenomenal. And to start with him as a chef, to see him how brilliant he is as a chef, to see him how brilliant he is as a businessman, but then to see him producing, directing, and running, his own production company, Studio Ramsay, is, you just think like, what a person. And Marcus Waring, with Marcus, just with Marcus, like the discipline, real discipline, that kind of habits, then what keys to success, start with turning a routine, then becomes a habit, then that leads to consistency. There are things for me that that I really learned from Marcus, just that a relentless discipline, and like, yeah, just sort of like, right, start, like now you should be thinking about like, getting yourself onto the property ladder and all of this. And back then I was too young for that at that time, but I look back on that now, and just very, a very, very routine, structured, like, sort of headstrong human being. And those, Gary, Gordon, and Marcus, like all three of them pivotal as mentors for me in moving forward.
And you said Gordon's unbelievable. Like, how is Gordon unbelievable from what people see on TV? Because on TV there's like a braggadocious, he's lots of fiery personality. How is he different behind the scenes? Because I think a lot of what you do in private actually sets you up for what you do in public.
Anyone you talk to, like Angela Hartnett, she'll say the same. Claire Smith, she'll say the same. You're, like, you have to remember what Gordon, I feel, is just, unbelievable at is all the different hats that you wear. And I try to do the same thing in my world, and that is that you've got to, in order to succeed, in order to get on, and it depends what you want. If you want to be sort of behind the stove, and that's what your goal is, and you're going to do that until you're 65, 70, that's fine. But if you want to be a bit more commercial, if you want to kind of create growth, if you want to inspire more people, and those people that you then inspire then go on to kind of like open a restaurant for you, or go on to kind of be your COO or your finance director, whatever that is, what I just find incredibly inspiring about Gordon, and he was like it exactly when I worked with. Yeah, honestly, he'll tear you an absolute new one. But my first ever bollocking from him, which was just like, whoa, thrown off the service, sent down to clean the fridge, and down there cleaning the fridge, thinking, what have I done? I'm not good enough to work here. I'm really not. I'm not what. I'm out my depth. And I just remember him like running down the stairs, and he was like, service had finished, and he was like, and he just sat me down and he explained to me why he had to take me off the section and throw me off and clean the fridge downstairs. And quite simply, because it's restaurant Gordon Ramsay, and the expectation is through the roof. And like, that if those mistakes get into the dining room, it's not like, oh, the commie chef on the larder, Paul Ainsworth, it's restaurant Gordon Ramsay. And I take that now into my world, that you've kind of in order to build that reputation, that's where that standard of excellence and discipline comes in. But also as well, the Gordon that I work for is grown and is different, as we all are. Like, I'm not the guy I was when I opened this. I was a guy when I opened this, and that I could be really like vicious and angry and not managed the right way. But we all grow, and as long as you keep growing and changing and understanding, that's part of life. You're not going to be perfect from, like, goes back, we're not going to be perfect, but as long as you question it all the time. But if you have a snippet into the world of Gordon Ramsay and everything about it, and having that opportunity to see what I saw and do Next Level Chef, but also some of the doors that Gordon's opened for me since he kind of moved to Cornwall, and he doesn't live here full time, but he has a house here in Cornwall. And I can feel that it's like, do you know what, Paul? Well done. You've not done it with you've not done it with like my help is in terms of investment and all of that. Gordon was a big part of my life in a culinary sense, but I feel like a sense of like he's proud and he wants to say well done. And if I can open a door for you as Gordon Ramsay, or if I can help you, or if I can give you a bit of guidance, and that, like, I will. And that's quite often the bit that people don't see to Gordon Ramsay, which Claire Smith, Angela Hartnett, and loads more would tell you exactly the same thing.
As in that he's, it's fascinating not seeing that from kind of the I know TV is just, it's a slither of us who a human being is, but it's just so fascinating. And now Next Level Chef, that's on now. What advice has he given you? Because you've both evolved, right? So when he made you clean the fridge, that was 23 years ago, whatever it was. Now, maybe in the last 6 months, when you guys recorded that show, what advice has he given you, like, now, as he's changed as well?
Okay, so this is like 9 o'clock in the evening. This isn't a cookery, like as in a cookery slot. This is like entertainment. And I was well aware of that, from the beginning. I knew what like slot this was going in. And I think naturally I am like a very, probably sometimes to a fault maybe, like I am very sort of self-deprecating. Like I think that always comes, but again, I'd rather be like that. I'm more comfortable in that space of like, really, why me? Why me? Out of all of the, I'm about to kind of launch a show with Gordon Ramsay at 9 o'clock in the evening, ITV prime time. Why me? And Gordon was like very good at saying, why not you? And this is the reason why. And that was just really, really like amazing, for me to be like, just that, stop saying why you, why not you? And, just, really, which I can't, I wouldn't, I would find it uncomfortable saying what he said about me and like, why me? Because I just, again, goes back to that deprecating, but like, what he said to me and why me was like, okay. And it was like, do you know what, Paul, you've got some skills, you've got some good things to say. And I enjoy mentoring people. And when that opportunity came along to do that, to be able to kind of be quite hands-on with it. And I think when you watch the next two episodes 2 and 3 aired last night, you'll start to get a real feel for it. Like there's a lot to take in on episode 1 because it's a fast, high octane kind of thing. And it was just, like just that real nurturing and like, you've got this. I've picked you to do this because, Paul, you aren't here by default. You're not here because there was, let's use Paul because he seems like a nice guy. You're here because you deserve to be here.
I mean, that's just so reassuring for me and loads of listeners as well. Because I even before this interview, I was like thinking, bloody hell, who am I to be doing this interview with Paul? So I love that. And that again, this one sentence just to completely slice through imposter syndrome. Why not you? Why not you? And I love that. Final question. I want to end. I know we've talked a lot about your dad, but I want to talk. I asked this to all guests who've got kids. I think it's really interesting lens. So Cici is 6, as you said. I don't know, she's young, but like, what advice would you give to her as she's when she grows up and is about to embark out on the world?
Now, with exactly as you say, with the lens that the world that Cici is going into, and and it's very easy to be doom and gloom and all of the things, and we are, I think, as a world now, we are divided more than ever, and
Yeah.
it seems. I don't know if you sort of feel like that. I think we look back maybe on our time, like the 90s, and and like, okay, we've always had recessions, we've had wars, we've had tough times, right the way you look through all the 1900s and back. There's always plagues, whatever. I think at the moment it does feel very overwhelming. It's strikes, cost of living, the war in Ukraine, COVID, like, just to name a few. It's a constant recession. Like, it's just an absolute constant. And I think that if I can pass on anything to Cici, and that is, I'm just going to make sure that I do everything in my power to make sure that she feels adequate, but not confident or sorry, that's wrong. I don't mean confident. I want her to feel confident, but not overconfident and cocky and I'm better than you. But ultimately, just want her to be happy. And if she can be, because I feel if she can be happy, or anyone can actually in this day and age kind of try and wake up most days feeling that, like, I'm happy within myself. In my personal opinion, you're a multi-millionaire.
Such a powerful way to end, and it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, is this, make it happen together. And we're talking about how if you're not happy, just kind of not get out of the business, that's too strong a way of saying it. And then also speaking to your daughter, just be happy. Paul, astoundingly grateful, thoroughly enjoyed that. Deeply implore all our listeners to watch Next Level Chef and listen to the podcast. And the episode with Seapa is really good, I thought. So thank you so much. Really
Pleasure,
appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Dan. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Awesome.